Well, I think it's like not looking at failures as failures or mistakes as mistakes, but looking at them as lessons.
But when you understand why you're doing it, you become powerful.
I've also been curious because a lot of people get mired in purpose, right? It can be a heavy conversation. For me, it's a light one because I know it. And so do you think, just to bring it back to joy, the more clear you are and the more aligned you are, the more at peace you are, the more authentic you are, and the more joyful you are?
Joy is the outcome of something else, which is fulfillment.
Welcome to JOY², Live with Joy. This is the podcast where we get to explore the power of joy, purpose, passion, and fun, and how joy, when practiced intentionally, transforms how we live, work, and lead. I'm your host, Greg D. Coker, and I believe that when you live with joy, everything gets better, and I mean everything. And this isn't just about feeling good. It's about unlocking joy as a resource, one that fuels better leadership, meaningful work, and thriving lives. Each week, we share the stories, the insights, and the sparks that ignite more joy, because joy is contagious, it's powerful, and it belongs to all of us. So lean in, stay curious, and let's create more joy together. This is JOY², brought to you by Essentia Group. Welcome back to the JOY² Live with Joy podcast. I'm your host, Greg D. Coker, and this is where we have conversations designed to inspire, energize, and empower people to live, work, and lead with more joy intentionally. And today's conversation is going to be a fascinating blend of entrepreneurship, storytelling, purpose, communication, humanity, and what it really means to connect in a world overflowing with noise. Today's guest is someone whose life and career genuinely defy categories. Pascal Wiscour-Conter is an international entrepreneur, strategist, storyteller, educator, and author originally from Luxembourg, who has spent more than 2 decades building businesses and experiences around the world. He began his career in finance before shifting into entrepreneurship, helping launch and promote a unique Luxembourg maritime registry for mega yachts in a landlocked country, no less, which already tells you Pascal doesn't exactly think inside the box. That journey eventually took him to Monaco and then California, where he developed a cloud-based tangible asset management platform long before SaaS became mainstream. Along the way, he immersed himself in the worlds of Silicon Valley innovation, Hollywood storytelling, Broadway creativity, real estate, academia, and strategic communication. Today, Pascal specializes in entrepreneurship, strategy, storytelling, and purpose-driven communication. He serves as the community engagement and development officer and strategic communication faculty at the Luxembourg School of Business. Wow, that's a mouthful. He's also the author of a remarkable new book called The Culture of Purpose: How to Communicate in an Age of Intelligence, a book that explores how purpose, trust, storytelling, and authentic communication become even more essential in a rapidly accelerating world shaped by technology and AI. And beyond all of those accomplishments, Pascal is an extraordinary human being. I first connected with Pascal thanks to our mutual friend and podcast superstar, Jamie Mason Cohen. And Jamie could not have spoken more highly of him. In fact, Pascal and Jamie interviewed me together on Jamie's podcast during a chapter of my own midlife reinvention journey. And even though Pascal and I had never met before, we hit it off immediately. Since then, we've connected several times virtually, and I can honestly say Pascal shows up with full joy, undivided attention, sheer brilliance, and incredible energy every single time. He's one of those rare people who makes you feel deeply seen and valued in the conversation. He's a remarkable entrepreneur, an incredibly thoughtful communicator, a dedicated family man, and honestly, it's pretty obvious why people love being around him, including myself. Pascal, welcome to JOY² Live with Joy podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Greg, thank you very much. You already gave us the famous first words. Thank you so much for this intro.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Well deserved. I should have had humility in there, because that's one thing that when I think about you and our conversations and all your accomplishments, there's no bragging, there's no look what I did, there's no look how interesting and how awesome I am. You're very focused kind of on me often in the conversations, even though you're sharing, your story. So I kind of thought that a cool way to start the conversation is to talk about your journey, because it's one of the most fascinating blends of entrepreneurship, storytelling, technology, academia, and human connection that honestly I've ever come across. So you've lived and worked in so many different worlds, finance, startups, mega yachts. We'll talk about that. Just saying that word sounds crazy. Yacht already sounds big. Mega yacht is a whole other story. Including then there's also Silicon Valley, Hollywood, Broadway, education, and the list goes on. So I thought, like, when you zoom out and look at all those chapters together, like, what thread do you think is actually connected them all?
Well, it's the story of my life to find that thread. It's basically what has led me to do what I do now. And it started with a realization that I had when I was in California. So the whole story is just, yes, I started in Luxembourg. Why didn't I like finance? And then why did I enjoy so much being in yachting when I am not a yachting guy? To this day, I don't have my license. I had not
Right.
seen the sea except once when I was 4, when I started that business age 24. And then why IT? I'm not a developer. And then why the following steps? But that's exactly what happened in California when I started to understand. And as I looked back and I realized, okay, there's one outlier, which is what I was doing in finance compared to all the others. And it was not the field I was in, it was not who I was talking to or whether I was in charge of sales or something else. It was a very simple thing. The first one, I was not helping anybody. I was just doing something more in a capacity in a back office, but it was not at the service of a cause or of some people that needed something, or at least I
Right.
didn't perceive it that way, versus all the others, whether it's helping yacht owner that are millionaires or billionaires to just handle that beast and have peace of mind with it, or afterwards solving a problem for people who are looking for tools to manage what we call tangible assets. Going on in California, helping other startups, helping people set up a writer's room so that we could write stories. And everything I've been doing afterwards, that was my purpose. And that's literally how it led to try to understand what is purpose and what was that thread? Why was I happy sometimes and others not? And I realized that when I knew what I was doing, you know, that saying, that this Chinese saying, so I'm going to just twist it, then you are strong. But when you understand why you're doing it, you become powerful. And that was really the thing. The moment I realized why I actually cared doing certain things, everything started to make sense and felt aligned. And since then, although it was a progressive evolution until I really got it, but now everything I choose to do or not is always because I will run it through that filter. Does it align with my values, my purpose, my meaning, and so on?
I love that. It's interesting because I mean, purpose is something that I've been in the conversation of for decades as well. Like, what's my purpose? You know, and I've been fortunate to know my purpose for probably 25 years, right? To co-create more joy in the world by instilling a deeper sense of purpose, passion, and fun in people and organizations. I've also been curious because a lot of people get mired in purpose, right? It can be a heavy conversation. For me, it's a light one because I know it. But then there's people that aren't really clear about their purpose and they're, you know, they could, whether they feel lost or they should know it. I'd love to hear kind of your purpose, but also too, what do you feel is the connection between purpose and joy?
First, you know, as I had to do this research for the book I wanted to write, notably about purpose, which is kind of often perceived as a fluffy notion. So I tended to have a lot of pushback when you were talking of purpose. And yet,
Right.
when you felt it, when you knew it, it was important. So the first step was trying to learn how to find my own and then applying it to help others to find their own. And there's different ways because purpose is something elusive because you basically need to talk to the limbic system in the brain and not the neocortex. And there's a
Okay.
very simple question to illustrate that. If I am
Okay.
asking you why you love your family, you cannot explain why. You can say
Right.
lots of things, but because it's
Right.
a matter of the limbic system, why we care for certain things. So when you try to find out, basically the methodology I apply, and I've learned it from Simon Sinek and this famous Start With Why methodology, but it takes
Yeah.
like a couple of hours with the people because it's all about how they will react and how you guide them to try to give you the answer that they need to give you so that you can help them find that purpose. Because the neocortex tries to come in all the time, and the whole thing is to try to get that neocortex to sleep so that you can talk openly with the limbic system that will give away the why and a number of things because they're emotional. The other aspect, as I was looking into what is purpose, I made one incredible discovery, is that we tend to use meaning and purpose as being the same thing. It's not. So meaning tends to be looking backwards, and it's something more egocentric, self-centered if you want. And it's more like what I deeply care about based on what I have experienced and learned from the past. And purpose is something that is much more future-looking, forward-looking, and community-oriented. So basically, when you know your meaning, that's kind of your noble cause, what you deeply care for, so that you know what you want to achieve, that aspirational goal, that's your purpose, where you want to go. So to your question of the connection with joy, I think that the first step is to understand these two concepts, because now that's how I framed it also as I came up for the book with the idea of a tree of business life, just like the tree of life, but now it's also in business, that you need to be anchored in your meaning and you need to strive for your purpose, just like you're rooted and you are going for the sky. And when you do that, when you know these two elements already, that gives you a sense of alignment. So that's already very satisfactory. But then when you get to do it on a daily basis, whether it's professionally or otherwise, you just feel that alignment and that accomplishment that you are doing what you meant to and that you're striving for what you really care for.
It's interesting because I wrote a question down about your book, actually. And, and I said, one of the things I love in your work is the idea that purpose isn't just branding or messaging. It becomes an organizing force for human connection. And in your book, you talk about aligning vision, mission, and values in a way that creates authenticity and trust. So why is that alignment so important today? I know you're just talking about alignment, so I thought a good time to bring that up.
Yeah. And so that was the idea. Then how can I visualize that to make it easily understandable? And that's again how this epiphany of like a tree came up, to say you are anchored in your meaning, which is basically also your vision statement when it's an organization. That's why you care. See, why did you set up the organization? Why are you going there every day and do something? Meaning that now you're really involved. It's not like you just go there for a pay. And then how you're going to go about it, that is the mission. So you know why you care, you know how you're going to go about it, and the outcome is the value proposition, what you are providing. And if now, why I care and how I go about it and what I'm delivering, which is basically, it's like talk the talk and walk the walk. If I tell what I'm going to do and I do what I said, then this feels like an alignment. And when you have this alignment, there's a perception of authenticity. And if you have this authenticity perception, you start to trust. Now you can start to engage with people when you have this trust.
And that's where the human connection, part that you talks about, where you're able to kind of connect at a deeper level, an authentic level.
Absolutely. It's like as humans, we are wired to live in communities. There's something fascinating called the Dunbar number. And so Mr. Dunbar discovered that we are wired to handle something like a community, a tribe, if you want, of 150 people. So that means two things. We need these connections, and we cannot handle more than, on average, 150, which is why you don't remember all the connections you have on social media.
Right.
But we do need it. We really do need it.
And so do you think, just to bring it back to joy, the more clear you are and the more aligned you are, the more at peace you are, the more authentic you are, and the more joyful you are? Would you say that's like a natural kind of progression? Or can you infuse joy at the beginning, of it? Like, can it be a joyful process, finding out the things that you just mentioned, right? Your meaning and your purpose and
so vision. I think that joy is the outcome of something else, which is fulfillment. So if you feel fulfilled, if you feel aligned between what you care and what you're doing on a daily basis, then you have this fulfillment, and that fulfillment gives you a sentiment of joy. So I really think it's not you're not joyful all the time, so it's not a permanent state. There's ups and downs, but there's also like moments that, again, you have a good day with, 4 great news and 1 bad news. Which one are you thinking about in the evening? Probably the bad news. Because again, we are wired for that.
Right.
So We just need to learn to focus on the good things so that we can feed into that joy or feeling of joy.
It's interesting because that's kind of the way that I've been talking about it now for a while is being intentional with it. So I agree that it can be a result, a reward and a result and an outcome for sure, because I think that's how we typically think about it. And I also think we can use it as a strategy. I mean, I think it's one of the most untapped energy resources in companies and in people's lives, really kind of tapping into that joy. And there's lots of different ways to tap into it. It's there, whereas happiness often is kind of circumstantial. We talk about if I do this, then I'll kind of be happy. If I make this amount of money, then I'll be happy. If I lose this amount of weight, then I'll be happy. Where I think with joy, there's something that we can do from an intentionality standpoint and from a responsibility standpoint, take responsibility for our own joy. And maybe if we're not clear about our meaning and our purpose and where we're going as a company or as an individual, that could be blocking it. That could be getting in the way of it, as well.
Yes, I agree. I really think that joy being the outcome of a state, you're looking for that state of fulfillment, which you will get when you have this alignment, so that
Right.
you really feel that you're doing what you're aiming for, and that respects the noble cause, the things you deeply care about. I really think that once you have this, that's why it's interesting to understand your meaning and your purpose, so that you can start to define. You can build your own tree, and now you can, everything that you decide to do, you can basically every time run it through that filter. And then it's like with the startups, something that I coach, like the first question I ask them always is like, why are you doing this? And then, you get typical answers like success or change some market or make money, whatever. And I said, all those are outcomes. That's going to be a
Yeah.
happy consequence if it works. And joy is the same thing. It's a happy consequence when you have the alignment. But what you're striving for is this alignment, and that you are executing against your vision so that you can achieve that purpose that you have.
Made me think about, in the retreats that I've led when I talk about purpose and we don't spend a ton of time on it, but I do share, my thought that people often get mired in it. And I think it can be a heavy conversation, right? If you're not sure. And I said, well, what if your purpose as a starting point is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, as a starting point is to love your life. Like, and I'm talking from an individual standpoint, like your purpose is really, because the more you love your life, the better everything's going to be. You're going to lift the energy up in the room. You're going to probably make better decisions because you're focused on what is it that, brings joy to you? What is it that makes you happy?
Yes.
And then maybe along that way, as you're kind of exploring and you're in that conversation, you're really focused on loving your life. Maybe then something more specific will come out. That. So it's a way to kind of, I was trying to give kind of my guests some space, give them enough space where they could give themselves permission to not get mired in the potential heaviness of that conversation, but maybe even as a starting point. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because again, that's just my opinion. That's just an idea that I have, trying to help people really figure out what they want in life and get what they want. So that was just one kind of conversation among many. So, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay.
And they can be
I
contradictory
don't want to
too, because
repeat. No, I
again,
don't want to repeat myself, but it's
no.
you can see that a lot of people struggle to find that their purpose, because again, I think it's not a clearly defined notion, and that's why I was like curious to try to understand it, because we tend to rationalize things. And your point of saying you have to love your life, what does that mean to love your life? That probably means that you have to accept your life, because your life cannot be perfect. So that means you have to accept the good and the bad. As far as I'm concerned, you mentioned a few of the things that that I did, and you very kindly mentioned all the things that sounded like very positive. But there's a lot of things that really went wrong. And I know one thing is that I'm the person I am today thanks to the things that went wrong, because that's when I learned stuff. And that's like the famous phrase from Steve Jobs. I mean, you can only connect the dots backwards. And so
Yeah.
you probably will have a happy life if you understand how to connect the dots backwards, because then again, everything starts to make sense, and there's a sensation of a feeling of alignment even there, that that the reason you had to go through certain periods in your life that were either good or bad was because there was something to learn along the way. And as long as you manage to look back at it, and that basically your past becomes kind of your future wisdom, and that you can look into the future and have gain some sense of confidence that whatever's going to happen, you will find a way to make things work out because you have all that past that teaches you. And that I can connect that again with something I found out that surprised me in neuroscience, which was that the brain basically works in a very similar way. And it was very controversial when it came out, and now it's like getting more and more accepted. The brain works like an LLM, like an AI, is that we are using the accumulated data of the past to try to project by probabilistically guessing the immediate future. See? So
right. That's how we're wired naturally.
So if we are capable to understand what we can take away from the past, whatever it was, good or bad, it probably will give us a sense of comfort looking into the future, which probably can trigger this state of fulfillment, which then has as a consequence a perception of joy.
I love that consequence, because sometimes the consequence, we at least I've thought of that as negative. Like, there's that, I think it's a French, expression or proverb where it's like, sooner or later, we all sit at a table of consequences. Like it may take a while, right? Based on, how we're living our lives and stuff like that. But that's, I love the positive spin on it, having joy.
Do we have a choice? I mean,
yeah.
You can just be sad and unfulfilled because you're angry about everything that didn't work out, or you just can let go of it and just see where you can learn something and then go move forward, right? So sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, but you never lose.
Well, I think it's like not looking at failures as failures or mistakes as mistakes, but looking at them as lessons. You talked about your past as wisdom, right? I mean, really looking at it's our best teacher. I've been consistently hard on myself my entire life, and it's I'm a work in progress like all of us, and continually trying to look at ways to be more gentle, with myself, and to let go of certain things. Okay, that happened. So, and I've asked a lot of people, how do you let go of stuff? I mean, I don't know if, I'd love to hear your thoughts too, because like I've asked 100 people probably over the last 20 years, like, because it's like sometimes I feel like I'm really good at letting go of certain things, and other times I feel like I suck at it. So, where it's something that just, it's there, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I did that, or I said that. Maybe I've apologized. Maybe I've made amends. Like, I've learned from it. It's not something that I'm going to probably say or do, or if I do, I'm quick to apologize or whatever. But, and one, it's interesting because I read Michael Beckwith's kind of his 3-step letting go process. And it really resonated with me because it was simple and it was clear. And so this is one that I've kind of used where, the first stage is really acceptance. Just accepting that whatever happened. If I find myself saying, oh, I can't believe it, or that's unbelievable, like I'm still in that disbelief. I haven't really grounded myself in that it happened. So, one is just accepting that it happened. And then 2 is it's learning. That's where what can I learn? What have I learned? What can I learn? What can I do differently? So it's really gleaning the wisdom out of that lesson, out of that situation, out of that circumstance. So learning, harvest the good is what he refers to it as. There it is. And then 3 is really letting go of the rest. And it's really forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving maybe another person, and then really letting go. So that process is just, okay, it happened. This is what I've learned. This is what I'm going to do differently. And then forgiveness. If I forgive myself, I made a mistake. I made the best decision I could at the time based on my level of awareness. Now my level of awareness is higher. So I'm not going to make that same exact mistake again, most likely. Hopefully not. But anyway, it's kind of, because you mentioned letting go. So, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, how do you let go of that stuff? How do you kind of learn from your past and use it to guide, yourself, and use it to propel you forward as opposed to drag you down?
So, despite everything you described, what I did, I am actually a world champion imposter syndrome.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
I have
I can relate.
grown, and I could go back into my childhood and adolescence to explain to you why and so on. But the thing is that I never felt that I was worthy or good enough. For a long period, the unfortunate consequence was that because I didn't realize it, is that I was self-sabotaging me.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
time and again, there were things when things were going really well, I was asking myself, why is now something coming and disrupting it? And it was basically me, or somehow just my approach or my behavior. And so the moment I started to understand that, and that it was a heavy weight, then the idea was say, okay, how can I let go of that?
Yeah.
And it's just, you have to forgive yourself. I mean, it's just, I don't see another way than just to say, it happens. The only thing I can do now is see, is there any lesson I can learn from it and not beat myself up? It's done, it's done. And then hopefully do better next time and remember it. And that gives you some sort of more lightness. And if you're less heavy, then perhaps you start to approach things in a more, like natural way, like more, you're going to be more open to perhaps your intuition, so you're going to listen more, you're going to, and as you're less heavy and lighter, for some strange reason, things, in my experience, become almost easier. See, so it's almost like if we were overthinking things to make them complicated, when sometimes just focusing back on what was the meaning and the purpose, and just saying, okay, so I'm going to just align myself again with that, act in coherence with that, and then somehow things become easier. And honestly, today, sometimes I am very surprised at what's happening. I mean, even, who am I to write a book? And then, as you know, I just came back from this tour in the US. I'm like, wow, the feedback that I got. And I'm like, I'm humbled because why would even I dare to do something like that? And I'm exhilarated by the impact it had. And so I want to do more.
Yeah, I love that. I can't wait to read your book. Yeah. When's that coming out?
Next month, in June.
Next month. Okay. I knew it was soon. I knew it was coming out soon. Okay. Fantastic.
We're finalizing all the last elements, and then the pre-release is coming soon. And then, yes.
Okay. We'll get a link out.
I should say, yeah. We did pre-release, so the website went live, and now we're going to soon open the pre-ordering, and then, yes.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah. And I'll include that too, with the podcast as well. So. No, I love all this. It's a great conversation. I love, because I think there's so much suffering going on, right? At work and at home and everywhere in between. And, what can we do in our conversations like this, where we're just sharing real stuff, right? And hey, this will work for me. It may not work for you, but here's an idea I had. Here's something that I did. Here's some things I do to forgive myself. I think, all that, whatever we can do to help kind of lighten the load, I think helps us to see things a little bit differently, right? It makes things a little easier. We're less reactive and more responsive, in a positive. We're more kind, I'm even my son a couple of weeks ago, we were chatting and I think I'd apologized to him. I think I was frustrated. I took something out on him. It's not something I do very often. And when I do it, I apologize pretty quickly. And he said, Dad, goes, sometimes you apologize to me, and I don't even remember what you're apologizing for. Like, I don't even remember. You're like, yeah, I'm sorry if I was being hard on you, a few days ago about whatever. And he's like, because I think he sees me for who I am. He sees me as the essence of who I am. So I think with that, there comes some flexibility, or what's the word I'm looking for? Some space, right? To be human, right? Like he's not looking for a perfect dad. I'm not perfect by any stretch. I'm a recovering perfectionist. That was a tough road to be on for a while. It's like the horizon, trying to go for the horizon, never attainable, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot we can learn about ourselves and a lot we can share with others. And I think,
and you said something, because it's true everywhere. It's not just in our lives, it's also in our work. Something that struck me when I came back to Luxembourg from New York. And Luxembourg has this reputation of being a very wealthy country and everything. So everyone starts to build up this image saying, oh, they must be all very happy. And then you look, for instance, that there's this yearly Gallup quality of workplace study. We're at the bottom. I mean, that is the surprise. So if you're looking at the benchmark is like the best in class companies, people have a level of engagement at around 70%, which is very high. Then when I'm asking people here in Europe to say, like, what do you think is higher, Europe or US? And then everyone's, oh, Europe, because we have this quality of life and everything. And it's no. The US average is 30%. The European average is 20%. The Luxembourg average is 10%. So the people are not fulfilled at work. And I have friends who are counting the years until retirement, until they can get out of that work that they don't like, but they go there because the pay is really good. And sometimes I've met people who had an opportunity to change, to do something else. And they were rationalizing why they wouldn't change and just coming up with lots of false good reasons why you shouldn't change. And in the end, my conclusion is always the same, just to ask them, okay, it's a very simple question you have to ask yourself now. Do you want to be comfortable or do you want to be happy?
Yeah.
See? And a lot of people have chosen comfort. So we have people here that are wealthy, have well-being, technically speaking, at least materially speaking, and aren't happy, are not fulfilled, aren't happy. And at the same time, that struck me when I came back after 20 years, how we have grown complacent. Like 2 or 3 decades of being rich as a country has pushed the average level of complacency up. See, so now we think we're good, and we forget that there's a lot of challenges out there, and especially these days, it is something I'm like, I hope that people will wake up in time.
I do too. And they've even with Gallup, I mean, they've done studies, and money isn't the most important thing, working. People aren't, that's not number one. I don't even think it's on the top 5 list of what's important for employees, right? I mean, there's, belonging and, recognition and, there's other things that people are looking for. And I think the comfort that you talk about is uncomfortably comfortable, right? They're comfortable because it's familiar, but it's uncomfortable because they don't enjoy it. And Gallup came up with this term, quietly quitting. So they've quietly quit. They haven't literally quit, but they're punching the clock. They're not, they're doing bare minimum. They're making sure they don't get fired, but they're not engaged. They're not happy. They're not fulfilled.
So the notion I came up with, it's golden shackles. So you're stuck in a highly paying job. You do not dare to speak up, perhaps, because there's a hierarchy, there's an organization, there's a number of things, because you don't want to get into trouble. Because yes, we're a wealthy country. That also means that if you want to buy a house, it's extremely expensive. So a lot of people here spend 40% of their incomes in just like housing. So you don't want to put yourself at risk. So that means you become silent. You have this quiet quitting just because you are in that golden cage that pays super well, but you just can't raise the voice, or you feel that you cannot allow to even try because you don't want to take that risk.
It's the total opposite of kind of getting that golden parachute. Sometimes, I've had friends where they weren't totally happy and they were making some changes at work, and then they were offered an opportunity to leave, and recognized for their years of service with a golden parachute, with a large sum. Where it's like, oh my gosh, I mean, they weren't totally happy and now they're getting paid to leave. I mean, that's the opposite of that. That's like the ideal if you're not happy, right? Because then you've got 2 years of pay or a year of pay, and then whether you're looking for a job right away or you're taking some time off or whatever. But yeah, it's a different situation and certainly not the norm. The norm is most people aren't happy at work.
Add to that also, what will people think? You see? So we're also afraid of the image we're going to.
That's right.
Oh God, he lost his job.
Yeah, I know. And we get concerned. I mean, we're often up in each other's grills and each other's business. And it's like, the gossip and the stuff. I mean, I don't really participate in that very much anymore. It's like, what can we do to recognize people for who they are? What can we do to connect with people? And I'm a personal development junkie and a human connection junkie. I just want to find out, like, what makes people tick? What do they love? What do they don't love? How can I support them? I mean, I came up with 2 questions in my 20s that I've asked a lot of people. And I think it was more about how can I be of service to people? And it's number 1 is, what do you want? And number 2 is, how can I support you in getting what you want? And
You
the one
just
thing is,
described your meaning and your purpose. You just described noble cause and aspirational goal.
Oh, that's interesting. Look at this. I'm a work in progress, and we uncovered some good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
wow,
indeed.
that's cool.
And I agree with you. I mean, I have the same thing. And that's one of the things I enjoy very much teaching at the Luxembourg School of Business. I have bachelor students. They're first year, 18 years, 19 years. So you have to push them out of their comfort zone, of course. So I draw 2 circles and I show them, like, an inner circle, say, that's your comfort zone. And the outer circle, that's your safe zone. So you never must get out of the safe zone. You always have to stay in that safe zone. But my job is to push out of the comfort zone, because that's where you're going to grow. And then I push them, like, writing and speaking, like literally strategic communication. And I tell them, I mean, the best thing I can do is to help you learn to connect with the people, because that's it. Whatever you're going to do afterwards, whatever your expertise is going to be, whatever field of activity you're going to have, you always have to communicate with people. So it is the most important skill. And so it's my job to help you learn to connect with the people, learn to communicate things, but also learn to listen to the other people so that you can have this meaningful engagement.
I love that, because business, it's all about relationships, right? And relationships are based on conversations and communication and trust and lots of stuff. So I think what an incredible gift to start, because at that age, not everyone knows what they want, right? They're trying to figure out, they picked a certain course, a certain line of study, a major that they're working towards because it felt right at the time. But it's kind of hard. How do you know you're going to love that until you're doing it? What are those things you can do to better understand you and what may be a better fit? And I think, you're really helping to create a space where they can do that, which I think is incredible.
That was also a very interesting realization. So when I was in New York, I was running this writer's room. So, a writer's room is where screenwriters come together and they're basically writing screenplays for movies, for TV series, so we wrote, for instance, the sequel of Les Mis for Broadway. Then unfortunately it didn't come out because it was COVID and everything, but the process was incredible. And then we had as an external advisor, the gentleman who wrote The Prince of Egypt. And you're learning a lot. Right. And then it dawned on me that we can use that as well in business. But the interesting thing is that once you know the methodology of storytelling, so it's really a very specific approach. I compare it to Swiss watchmaking. It's like a long process that you have to learn, like it's a craftsmanship. It's a teamwork. You have very specific tools and a very defined methodology. So it's not just like someone sitting, by moonshine and a candle and waiting for inspiration and then writing through all night long and then here's the piece of art. No, it's really a teamwork, and it's hard work.
And moonshine is from the moon, not drinking moonshine, right?
Well,
that's a different process.
Some might have both. You don't know.
That's a different podcast.
Some famous authors do also need the moonshine. But the thing is that I came to the conclusion, okay, now I know this methodology, but if I have the perfect storytelling, it's not working unless you have, and now we go back to the tree, some place where you can anchor it. So if your storytelling is a tree and it's no anchored, it's just falling. If you can anchor it into something solid, now it's steady. And what you can anchor it in is purpose. And that's why I had to dive into trying to understand that thing. And I was so happy when I found that neuroscience could explain it and help us, like say it's not a fluffy notion, it's a reality. See, because you read a lot about it, you see it everywhere, but why was that? How could I find a way to, because also once you understand it, you can rationalize it. If you can rationalize it, it's probably easier to convince people. Aristotle had defined, he said, like you need logos, ethos, and pathos. So logos is you need logic, data. Yep. Ethos, you have to show that you have ethics, that you are someone honest. And pathos, you need empathy. You need to understand how you connect with the people. And if you have the three, then you can speak well to persuade. That's the whole idea. So the whole research was to find those elements so that I could convince people that not only the methodology of storytelling is powerful, and storytelling, again, is another like word overused and not many people really know what it is. And then why would you even care for anchoring it into something called purpose? Why does that work better? And yeah, the outcome was, I can explain why now.
Well, it's interesting because I think I've heard the expression facts tell, stories sell. But again, I think, to look at it the way that you're looking at it is that there's really an art to storytelling. So I think is beautiful. And I'm sure you get into that in detail in your book and in your courses. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's multiple things. Like one thing, for instance, that is a bit known is the Disney mythology. So Walt Disney had like 3 states. And so research was made and a book was published about like the theory of geniuses. And it's to describe that you have 3 states in storytelling. And when a writer's room works, it's like, it can be 3 or a dozen people who come. The Simpsons, that's 12 people that come together every week and work hard together. And they go through different states of creation. The first one is called creative. So that's the moment where you just throw ideas into the air. You can never contradict. You are just supporting each other to throw all sorts of crazy ideas into the air. And I've seen, for instance, with startups, even a methodology where there's a competition of who comes up with the weirdest idea. Because that unleashes this, you dare to come up with crazy stuff. because you get a prize for it.
Those left field ideas, they call them sometimes left field, right? It's
But
so
otherwise,
far
you do
out.
not dare to share the idea. It's a crazy one, I will not tell them. So if all of a sudden this is a sport that the crazier the better, you unleash something in your brain, the creativity, and so you just throw out all these ideas. Then a week after, not right away, you have to let it sink in. The week after, you go into a realist mode. Now you start to take all these crazy ideas and you try to see how you combine them. Basically, creative mode, you were in a divergent thinking process. And
Right.
now you go into a convergent thinking process. And you try to just say, okay, this one doesn't work. This one, I can assemble it with the other one. And you start to build something using the crazy ideas or some of the crazy ideas. Another week, then the third state is now you go into critic mode. Now you're basically just bombarding it to see if it's watertight, to make sure that it is working. So that's one element. And then another element is, for instance, they use meta models. So a story is a model of a reality. So if there's a story of that really happened and you tell the story, that's the model of the reality. Now you need to structure your story so that it works. To define the structure of the story, which is a model, we call it a meta model. So writers will literally define how they structure, and they will use even NLP because they need to go back to how humans function to understand how you're going to build the structure. And what I found fascinating when I'm teaching it is that people come in thinking that it's about more words and lots of adverbs and adjectives, and that you blow up your phrasing. And at the end, they realize it's about the structure of the story. It's not how many words, it's not how you blow them up, it's a structure, and it's called a hero's journey. See, and so there's ways to do it. There's a simplified way I describe in the book of 8 steps. And if you look at famous movies, I mean, would you believe that movies like Top Gun or Star Wars are models of how you do hero's journey, how you structure it? And if you think of it, it's always kind of the same pattern. It's a hero in a balanced life. Something happens, the hero gets thrown out of balance, struggles to get back into balance, it backfires, continues the journey, and ends up in a moment where it's a make it or break it moment. So now all the data tells you don't do this once more. It backfired all the time, and it's getting worse every time. Like Top Gun, the first movie, the co-pilot dies. So it's bad.
Right.
See? And at the same time, your gut tells you something else. So you're basically in a leap of faith, break it or make it moments. And that's the whole beauty of how you build the story, including when you're trying to sell something. You take an espresso ad, what happens to George Clooney eventually leads to some strange contradiction of something. And that's how we build stories, so that basically we are using what happens in the brain to open it's kind of a 4 to 8 second branding window, if you want, where you can plant your brand.
That's fascinating. I think to be inside your brain would be pretty fascinating, the way that you think.
I'm not sure you want
the
to
way
go
that you
there.
probably, I mean, can you even just watch a commercial and enjoy the 30 seconds, or you're probably just thinking about the story and how they've created it at the same time, I would imagine.
Actually, so 2 things. Yes, I do. And then I pick the ones that I really find are well done. And then when I show them to my students, sometimes I literally tear up. And the students are looking at me thinking, and I've seen it 20 times, 50 times. But still, it still works for me. And perhaps even because I understand now the mechanics behind it, even touches me more. So it's not that you will become like, how could I say, anesthetized and you know more. No, it's the opposite. But it also means like a great movie, I think I will enjoy a great movie even more. And I have even less patience for lazy movies, if you want, because sometimes you just see, okay, they didn't do the whole work, they didn't go all the way, and maybe for understandable reasons. So I'm not judging at all, but I have less patience sitting in front of the movie, and then I'm as a disconnect.
You know what? The one thing I thought of, I love that too, because it's like you can tap into your own emotion by knowing the story. If it's something that they've really, you can follow it along, and it adds more meaning, I guess, to you. Like you said, I mean, you can tear up when you're thinking about, wow, all the thought and everything that went into that. I love that. What about those things that we talked about, kind of about what kind of can create joy? And you've shared a lot on that. What about those things that block joy, for you personally? What are the things that block joy, and how do you kind of remove those blocks?
I'm very sorry, I'm going to repeat myself, but it's also really, it's years of like thinking. It's not like just like that's why I'm actually saying it with confidence. It is really this alignment thing. Is that when you do not have joy, that means something's not flowing. We're not in the flow. And usually it's because there's not an alignment between why you care for certain things and what you're actually doing. See? That meaning and purpose thing. And it's usually where you can go and find it. And I get to do that in workshops with people, or even sometimes in companies, just to understand where something is not working. And the first task is literally to try and go back to the basics of saying, okay, let's try to understand the meaning and the purpose. Once we have this vision statement, let's see what the mission statement is. Now, if we know why we care, how are we going about it? And then let's see if the description of the value proposition we have fits, if we have this coherence. And it's not only because we tend to think, okay, that's what I just told you, you probably visualized marketing and PR. And so that's one side of the tree. But the other side of the tree is equal, that's inward. So outward, yes, makes sense. But inward, the team members are clients in a way. And so you also need to have an inspiring vision that you have described and articulated skillfully, so that these people can feel it and that they want to be part of it, and then they're going to contribute. And then you get higher engagement, because now people are not doing something because you motivate them with a premium money or whatever. They do it because they feel inspired, because by the vision. And so I think that in life, it's the same thing. So when you're not happy, again, that was Steve Jobs saying like that he would, he said like something like, when I'm shaving in the morning, when I'm watching myself in the mirror in the morning, and if I'm not happy with what I'm doing, if that goes on for too many days, then I know I have to change something. So but again, changing something requires courage, right? So it's a choice. So I think that all of us, we can feel when there's not this alignment. We probably consciously or not so, maybe we do not always admit it to ourselves, know that it's not in line, but maybe sometimes because we somehow know it would take a lot of courage to change, we will not even formalize it so that we do not have to face it. See, so I think that's the blocker. If you're no more listening to who you really are and what you're supposed to try to strive for.
It reminded me of, I remember reading it, I think it was a quote way back when it talked about harmony. It was like peace or harmony. And the definition that was in the book was, it's when what you're thinking and what you're saying and what you're doing are in alignment. And it's like, I loved reading it and I hated reading it at the same time, because I was like, oh my God. Because then I was just like, yeah, I'm saying this out loud. Like I remember I used to tell everyone, not everyone, but I would share with like, whoever I thought maybe needed to hear it, or maybe I needed to hear it. Life is as simple or as complicated as you make it, which I think is very true. But then it's easy to say. And then I finally, one day I was like, as I heard myself say it, and then I was like, wow, that's easy to say, but look at these areas where I'm complicating my life. So it was, me just like saying, yeah, I mean, it's a theory, but if I'm not putting that insight or that idea into action, then it doesn't really mean anything. It's not helping me in my life. Maybe it helped the people I shared it with. I don't know.
But I'm gonna rephrase it slightly. What you said, what you read, actually, also I spoke about it in the book. Is we tend to live by doing. So we do things.
Right.
And maybe the first step was that we say things. And then at some stage, we all understand, okay, from saying to doing, it's one thing to say, but then we want to do it. But there's also the approach that we are today, especially in a hyper-connected world, we are about seeming, how we look. I mean, you see these things like people smiling on social media and then a sad face after, like within a second. And so we need to move from seeming to being. So it's not just about what we do, the doing part, it's the being part. To be, you need to understand who you are.
I love that, because I think it comes down to being, how we're being, because our doing comes from our being. If I'm being angry, my doing is going to be angry. And then, it's like that be, do, have. I love that sequence of events. We usually think of it the other way around often, like kind of, well, if we're being a certain way, that's going to impact what we're doing, which is also going to impact what we're having. So you're right. It does boil down to how we're being.
We tend to end up where we're looking. And that's actually something that a race driver learned, that if your car is slipping, do not look at the obstacle, look where you want to go, because your body gonna have you do the movements that have you go where you are looking at. And I think in life, it's the same thing. Do not look at the obstacles. Always keep the mind and your look on the prize, if you want, on the aim. And then, yeah, again, ups and downs. It's not going to work all the time, but always keep your eyes on that aspirational goal, so that you always tend to consciously and probably not consciously go into the right direction.
I love it. I love it. Hey, Pascal, this has been an awesome conversation. I thought I wanted to wrap up with, what do you want people? We've covered a lot, actually. We've covered a lot of great things, and I appreciate your time and energy and wisdom. And what do you want people to get out of our conversation? Like, what would be like a takeaway, or how do you want them to feel?
For the blessed ones who already have found this alignment, some sort of confirmation and comfort, and just like an encouragement to continue. For those who are still questioning and trying to find out, hopefully the elements that will lead them to ask the questions. So the way I define storytelling, by the way, is to say people are not listening to the answer until they ask the rightful question. So the job of great storytelling is to bring them to ask that question, one sub-question at a time. So it's not right away. So if today there's a few hints in the conversation, like that opens some doors and have them like maybe one or the other epiphany, or just you know, like food for thought, and that they start to investigate, and that they feel also comforted by the fact that it's not easy, it's okay, but it's worth it, I'd be happy.
Amazing.
You need to go from an intention to an impact. That's the purpose of the tree. At the bottom, you have an intention. At the upper part, you have an impact. So if today we were able to trigger just a little bit, you and I, and thank you very much for having me here, and hopefully we were able to help, even if it's 3 people, then yes, we have increased the impact that we can have.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, I mean, Pascal, it's been such a rich and meaningful conversation. I've loved exploring the intersection of joy and purpose and meaning, communication, storytelling, humanity, and leadership, you know, with you today. That's been amazing. And what strikes me the most is that your work reminds us that in a world becoming louder and faster, like deeper connection with ourselves may actually come from slowing down enough to communicate with greater intention, authenticity, and heart. And that leads to deeper communication with others as well. So really getting to know ourselves. So yeah, it's been a fascinating.
The way I phrase that is, we're in a very noisy marketplace. Lots of merchants are shouting louder and louder, and now they have AI amplifiers, so they can even make more noise. What happens for a visitor? It's just overwhelming noise, and they do not hear the messages anymore. So if you want to bring across something, it's the art of learning to whisper into an audience's ear. And to do that, you need to understand who these people are, so that you can talk in their language about their concerns, not about you.
You know, that makes me think about people. You hear a lot of people talking about the golden rule: treat other people the way they want to be treated, which isn't a bad rule, because usually people want to be treated well, right? But the platinum rule is almost like what you just said, which is treat other people the way they want to be treated, because that takes intention and that increases the impact if you're really treating them, you know, because that takes getting to know them and what they like and what they don't like, and how you can deliver it and take responsibility for their listening, because if you know them at a deeper level. So yeah, that's what kind of came to me when you shared that. I love the whisper comment as well. So, well, yeah, thank you for your wisdom, your energy, and your generosity today. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Greg. It was a big pleasure.
Oh, it's been awesome. And to everyone listening, yeah, thank you for your time and energy. And if something from this conversation resonated with you, and if you heard one of Pascal's whispers and that resonated, please do something with it, and don't just let it sit there. Like, take one idea, one insight, one small shift, and put it into action, because joy isn't something we stumble into. It's something we choose intentionally. So thanks for being here. And as always, live, work, and lead with more joy. We'll see you next time on JOY². Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Pascal. Thanks for spending this time with us on JOY², where joy multiplies and everything gets better. Remember, joy isn't just something you feel. It's something you create, and it's something you pass on. If this conversation sparks something in you, share it, because joy is contagious. What we're building here is bigger than a podcast. It's a reminder and a movement that how we live, work, and lead truly matters. Until next time. Live with joy, lead with purpose, and never forget to have fun. Keep choosing joy squared. And if you're enjoying the journey, we'd be grateful if you subscribe, like, and share Joy Squared so the ripple keeps spreading.